Welcome to the Fuck Your Life Boxing Show. Yeah.
¿Qué pasó, way? It's your homeboy Quetzalcoatl. Piñazo por another video. On today's episode, we're going to cover the fight that happened over the weekend between Chris Algieri and Errol Spence. Very impressive performance by Errol Spence, who TKOs Chris Algieri in the 5th round. From the beginning of the fight, Errol Spence controlled and dominated Chris Algieri and was met with little resistance. Chris Algieri was never really able to get into his rhythm. He was never really able to get into the fight. And this was because Errol Spence controlled both the inside and the outside and was putting a hurting on Algieri, landing big shots on his ass, and dropped him 3 times in this fight. Once in the 4th, I believe, and twice in the 5th before it was stopped. After that 3rd knockdown, the referee had seen enough of the ass whooping that Chris Algieri was getting and stopped the fight. And rightfully so, because had Algieri been able to get up from that, he wasn't going to win this fight. And he was just risking getting some sort of permanent physical injury. So great stoppage by the referee. And with this victory, Errol Spence becomes the first fighter to stop Chris Algieri. And Chris Algieri is a fighter who's been in the ring with the likes of Manny Pacquiao, Provodnikov, and Amir Khan. None of these fighters were able to stop Algieri. So to see this from Errol Spence, a young fighter who's coming up, was very impressive. Where Errol Spence goes from here all depends on his management. I personally believe that if guided correctly throughout his career, Errol Spence could be one of the next big stars in boxing. But again, that all depends on how well he's managed from here on out. I've seen people already asking for Errol Spence versus Keith Thurman. They want to see him next versus Kell Brook. They want to see him in the ring versus Sean Porter. I personally believe that Errol Spence next 2 fights should probably be against B-level opposition for him to get a little bit more experience before they throw him in there with the elite names. I think that people should look at the overall picture of this situation. Yes, it was impressive to see Algieri stop like that. A fighter who had never previously been stopped, who had been in the ring with Manny Pacquiao, Provodnikov, and Amir Khan, as I previously stated. But Chris Algieri is also a fighter who only has 1 victory at welterweight. So you don't want to go ahead and just throw Errol Spence in there against the elite names and have him possibly suffer a bad loss when all that could be avoided by having him in there with some B-level competition for about 2 fights. Let him get some experience under his belt so he can properly develop as a better overall fighter and be better prepared for those elite names. Because sometimes some fighters just don't recover from a bad loss like that. You throw him in there too early in a fight that he shouldn't have been in, and he might never end up being the same. Whether it be mentally, he won't fight the same because he keeps thinking about that loss and it changes his style. It affects the way he fights. Or physically, where he'll take a loss to where he gets beat down and he just won't be able to take a punch the same way anymore. If I was managing Errol Spence, some of the names that I'd be looking for in terms of his next fight would probably be the winner of Andre Berto versus Victor Ortiz. I think that either one of those fights would be a good test for him. If he were to fight Andre Berto, he'd gain experience in fighting a fast boxer with a lot of heart. If he fought Victor Ortiz, he'd gain experience in fighting a southpaw and a power puncher, which would be a good test for Spence because we really haven't seen what type of punch he could take yet. But I think that the perfect fight for his next matchup would probably be against Robert Guerrero. Robert Guerrero is a solid B-level fighter who's been in there with some of the top names. And he'd gain experience in fighting a pressure fighter with a really good chin, which would be a good test for him if he's thinking about fighting Sean Porter, who shares some of those same qualities. And in a fight with Robert Guerrero, he would be able to get better mentally prepared for those big fights, because I'm pretty sure that Robert Guerrero's dad is going to be talking mad shit in the press conferences leading up to that fight. So he'd be better prepared for any type of mental games that these elite fighters might try to use against him in future fights. There's also a fight with Adrian Broner. Adrian Broner is a fighter who just moved back up to the welterweight division, and I think it would be very entertaining to watch Adrian Broner get his ass beaten exposed again. I'd pay money to see that shit. If he just wants to be in a title match for his next fight, you could probably put him in there with Jesse Vargas, although that fight, in my opinion, I think it comes with a lot more risk than the names I just mentioned before. But that's probably the weakest link in the top names at welterweight. So if he just wants a title match for his next fight, that's possible as well. But who do you think that Errol Spence should fight next? Let me know in the comments section. Let me know what you thought of this fight. And as always, if you like this shit, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. This is your homeboy Quetzalcoatl, signing the fuck on out.